Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, it's now time for our main event. Take a trip back in time to the golden era of the wrestling world with your host, Chris Tetrold Blade. Welcome to Once Upon a Turnbuckle.
Cool, so welcome back everyone to another very special episode of Once Upon a Turnbuckle, and I get to welcome back another returnee guest. Listeners to my show, to the audio part before I hit the video side, will probably remember this guy from way back in episode 13 where we spoke as part of my Facebook fans. I was there when we talked about the live experiences. This guy was on, and I had such a blast with him that we just had to bring him back and talk about something else. So welcome back, Andrew Lacelle. How you doing?
Not too bad. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Good. No, thank you for coming back. And we've got a topic. You know, anyone who's seen the video side can probably see a hint of what we are going to be discussing. But what's been happening with you, sort of since we last spoke, the last sort of few months? How things going?
Everything's been all right. Here in Canada, we are deeply engrossed in the NHL playoffs, so I've been really attentive to that.
Cool.
And also watching my professional wrestling, as I'm apt to do.
Awesome. And just to remind the guys that who may not have heard the first show, so you know, do you keep up with the current product, or are you sort of just a stalwart old school fan?
Well, I do keep up with it via, if you're on social media, it's pretty hard to avoid spoilers and people discussing it. As far as watching it, I'll watch Dynamite, AEW Dynamite. I'll watch their pay-per-views. I'll watch Ring of Honor's pay-per-views. And usually I'll just have either Impact or Ring of Honor TV or OVW TV on in the background while I'm working in the living room. So I'll catch it every once in a while if I turn my head.
Cool. So it's you grew up very much a bit like me, really, a fan of a certain era, bygone era. Some people may say, you know, but I still think back the 80s, 90s. Anyone who listens to my show will know that's the era that I really love talking about, and we've got a great topic to cover today because I'm glad we're doing it now, actually, because it kind of makes it more fitting, because June, sort of beginning of the summer, always meant one thing for me when I was growing up, particularly for a few, particular years, was the King of the Ring. You're kind of coming off of the kind of fallout from WrestleMania, one of my other favorite events. I was a great fan of the Big Five events. Mm-hmm. And so, going into SummerSlam, and then in 1993, they added the fifth event in the middle, which was King of the Ring. And
it was much needed because just the four, especially in 93, you needed something because you weren't having Hogan on TV weekly. No. So you needed something to carry it. And plus, May sweeps. So they would have the King of the Ring qualifying matches in order to get the ratings.
Yeah. And do you think by the time it came around that they added in, I'll go over a little bit of the history of the King of the Ring just quickly in a second, but when they introduced it as a pay-per-view event in 93, do you think it got to the point where spending sort of 2 or 3 months in between pay-per-views building storylines, do you think the scene had changed? That was kind of not really what they were doing, or it wasn't really the same market as it was years before?
Well, the fact of the matter is WCW kind of forced their hand because they had more pay-per-views, plus they had Clash of the Champions specials. There was no longer any Saturday night's main events to bridge the gaps in between the big four. So you kind of needed something, and it made sense for them to have King of the Ring because it was kind of like their Bunkhouse Stampede or their War Games where it was something for the house show audiences. But if you were a hardcore fan, you were familiar with it just from the PWI arena reports.
Quite. Going back, so this is something I wasn't aware of. So when I was growing up, obviously my earliest memories of King of the Ring was the first one in '93. I knew about it from the magazine review and sort of the preview and everything before I actually got to see the event on VHS. So it was kind of an odd concept for me because I hadn't seen many tournaments, especially like one night tournament events before then. But I didn't really know until later on that the King of the Ring existed quite a number of years before. Like you say, it was a house show event that they did going back. The first one was in 1985, I believe. Some of the guys
something I honestly feel is the thing that the WWE Network was made for, and the fact that we keep getting ride-alongs and table for threes and all of this content that nobody cares about, and these King of the Ring specials are sitting there in a box unseen. It's tragic.
There must be, because I know it was shot for a house show. They must have some recording of all the events they did, especially these.
Well, they showed footage of the '86 one in Harley Race's video after he died when they had the video. So there is footage out there, and especially when they had the hidden gems on the network, and every Thursday they were revealing new ones, and every Thursday I'd be waiting, is this the week that we get King of the Ring? Because there's no teaser. You didn't know what you were going to get. It never happened.
And I think because King of the Ring, really now, they've tried to revive it a couple of times. I've seen again. I've not watched them, but I've seen through reports that they tried to bring it back. It became more of a footnote, a little bit comical, because they would do it on a Monday Night Raw or something. There isn't the appreciation for the history of it like there is some of the other events. So maybe if that comes back, maybe they will delve into the archives. But they've got a captive audience there, all the guys that watch the network, and like me and you, just there waiting for it. So, it's
but I mean, even that said, I don't know if I would have the same type of rose-colored glasses for the previous, couple of generations ago now, if it had the same presentation that modern WWE has with the 73 camera cuts a minute. I wouldn't go back and watch King of the Ring '93 or watch King of the Ring '96 if it had that type of neck-breaking type of action. Just
I was going to ask you, actually. This is going to come up a bit later on, but we might as well ask it now. Is if they were to bring it back, do you think it would have the same feel, or would it have a draw to the current audience?
Well, it's kind of like how NXT brings back In Your House, or they'll have some remnants of past stuff, and it just winds up being so WWE-fied. Like, you'll have legends from the past, and they'll advertise that they'll be appearing on Raw, and it will be a backstage segment where they dance. That's the mentality of the WWE, and it's impossible to get excited. Like, I'm a sports fan, and imagine being a fan of a team that lost in the first round every year in the playoffs. You wouldn't care about the regular season because you know yourself that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter until the playoffs, and you don't believe until they actually do it. It's like you're not going to swing for a strike until the pitcher proves that they're going to throw it down the middle.
Very true. Very true. Good point. I think they tarnished the perception of King of the Ring by what they did in more recent years with it. Like I say, doing it as a throwaway on a Monday Night Raw when there was so much build up to it.
Honestly, even if you look back to the King of the Rings, and I kind of feel like the Intercontinental title tournament in 1990 after Ultimate Warrior vacated it was kind of like their test run for the King of the Ring.
Yeah, could well be, actually. I mean, looking around about that time, so there wasn't a King of the Ring in 1990. It was the only year they didn't have one back then. So they ran from 1985 to 89, and then the next one was 1991. And the 91 one, I think, was the first time that was the one I heard about that made me realise there were more before 93. And
I actually had that on VHS when I used
really?
Trader. Yes.
That's cool because that was won by Bret Hart. So it makes you I think he was perfectly placed to win the 93 one after what happened at WrestleMania, but maybe he had already proved in the 91 one that he could carry through a tournament. Obviously, he had a much better run. He had much more credible opponents in 93 than the 91 one. But
yeah, I'm not sure if January 93 would be looked upon as fondly if the finals was Bret against IRS.
No, not at all. But then one interesting point actually in the 91 one is I know he had to get substituted, but Kerry Von Erich was meant to wrestle Bret Hart in the first round. I can't think who the guy was. It's some sort of preliminary name, I think, that replaced him, that Bret then beat in like 30 seconds in the first round. But that was meant to be the Texas Tornado.
Interesting. See, that's what I always liked about the idea of tournaments would be unusual matchups, and not to keep beating a dead horse about modern WWE, but that's one of the complaints that fans have is just constant rematches. It's guys being married to other guys or performers being married to other performers, and they never branch out and engage with anybody that they're not involved in a program with at that time. And during the 91, 92, 93 era, you would occasionally get babyface versus babyface or heel versus heel, but there was a lot of matches involving people that didn't have feuds, which I didn't mind because it had more of a sports presentation. You don't always face your rivals.
No, quite. And you look back on, so going right back to the beginning, obviously, Don Morocco was the first winner in 85. They had what was probably quite a rare sort of heel versus heel match in the final where he beat the Iron Sheik. And
I would have loved to have seen it because I've been revisiting 81 and 83 WWF, and Don Morocco is without question the MVP of that era. He certainly falls off the cliff in 84, kind of has the dead cat bounce in 85 before completely being an afterthought in 86, 87 until his babyface turn, which he was just roided to the gills.
Yeah, see, my only real memory until sort of recent years, I suppose, of Don Morocco was 88, because the first time I saw him was SummerSlam and Survivor Series of that year. So I knew him as this sort of jacked up fan favourite, and I couldn't get my head around the fact that he was so hated at one point.
Oh, he had the crowd in the palm of his hands, and I'm not sure if it would have had the same effect if he was in a promotion that had a lot of talkers. Like if you go watch Mid-Atlantic, they've got Blackjack Mulligan, Ric Flair, Tully Blanchard, a lot of guys who can carry segments on the mic. But the WWF wasn't about that. They were more about in-ring charisma as opposed to stickmen. Yeah, absolutely. I think with the height of like Hulkamania that was, cliche, running wild at the time, you can see the direction they were going with the kind of, like you say, in-your-face sort of characters in the ring. And he had a good, looking back on this history, Don Morocco, he had a good pairing, because wasn't he with Freddie Blassie and Mr. Fuji? And he was with Grand Wizard initially for his first run in 81 when he won the Intercontinental title for the first time. And then when he came back in either late 82 or early 83, he was managed by Albano. And the thing about 83 to early 85, I wasn't watching at the time, so it's tough to get a grasp on when people went with other managers, because that was not unusual during that era to just see a wrestler all of a sudden have another manager without any storyline explanation. It just was presented that way, and you just accepted it.
Yeah. In the first, so the first King of the Ring you can kind of appreciate was a one night event, and he came out on top. Nothing really noteworthy came of that one that I can tell. And then you got to 86, it was won by, like you mentioned earlier on, Harley Race, who was the one who turned it into a bit of a gimmick. I didn't like his King gimmick, I must admit, but at least there was somewhere it started that you could link it back to.
Also, it was something that they did. The older I get, the more I realize with wrestling, it's all about TV time. If you're not on there, if you're not being presented, and you're just working house shows, or if you're on every few weeks, you're not factored in. You're not a main player. No. It's like watching a TV show, and let's say Seinfeld, and this for a couple of weeks Elaine's not on there. You start to wonder what's going on. Is she pregnant?
So it gave them something. They carried that whole King thing through as well, because then it passed to Haku, and then he lost the crown to Jim Duggan. So it's sort of, you could see that thread going through.
It was kind of like their version of the TV title in a way.
Yeah, I suppose so. I remember watching on one of the early VHSs I had. There was, I think it possibly was the match where Jim Duggan won it from Haku, and I thought, how odd for them to be fighting over this, the crown and the
Carnation crown.
Yeah, it was, and I think Jim Duggan was just, I don't know, his run was mainly possibly forgettable as the King. It didn't seem to fit really, but
the thing about Duggan is that he was the type of wrestler that every promoter would love to have, a over babyface that isn't affected by losses.
Yeah, true. Yeah,
and he was a good bridge between Haku and Savage. But I do find that the introduction of the $1 million belt kind of made the crown and the kingship kind of feel passé at that point.
Yeah, that's a good point. I never thought of that, actually. Yeah, it's the $1 million title, I thought, when I came into it, because it was still around when I first started watching, and I thought it was an actual recognised championship. I couldn't understand why people like Virgil, who won it, were never credited with being a champion, and it's a good gimmick to have, isn't it, really?
It is, because but it was the type of thing where there was no long-term future for a babyface holding it unless they were married to DiBiase in a feud, because it's not a babyface title by any stretch of the imagination.
So while the WWF was doing this whole King gimmick, which started really with Harley Race winning the tournament in '86, they had a couple more, or say 3 more tournaments in '87, '88, '89, which didn't really have any bearing on that at all. And they were won by Randy Savage, who would eventually be recognised as the King, Ted DiBiase, and Tito Santana. So, again, some interesting choices. You can see, again, that this was really intended for a one night, just to make this house show once a year.
It's Charlie. I'm not sure if you were ever aware of it, but they had a tag team steel cage battle royal on one show where the order of elimination made the matches for the rest of the night. So if the Killer Bees were eliminated first and the Hart Foundation were eliminated second, that would be the first match. And I always thought that was an interesting one too.
Yeah. Just
for something different.
I hadn't heard about that. You think about the amount of gimmick matches that have been around that they've tried to hand at in the last.
Yeah, they had a gauntlet too. I'm not sure if you're aware of that one.
I knew of the gauntlet match sort of again later on towards the end of the '90s when they started doing it, but I didn't realize.
Yeah, and it was like a long set of guys. There were like 20 guys in it. Like,
oh wow!
Pedro Morales had like a 3-run stretch where he won 3 matches, and then he gets beat by Big John Studd, who has like a few matches where he wins, and then it was a really neat concept. But King of the Ring was certainly amongst those as far as house show angle shows.
Yeah,
and it made sense for that to be the first pay-per-view outside of the Big Four.
So 5 of those 6, as well, interestingly enough, were all held in the same place. Sort of after the first one, the next 5 were held in the Providence Civic Centre, I believe, in Rhode Island, which, again, you can see why it'd be a recurring thing. Similar time of year, September, October, I think they put them out. It's a good thing to kind of build a show around.
And honestly, to go back to those winners that you mentioned, Morocco kind of made sense because he was feuding with Steamboat in '85. Race made sense because he was new to the territory and they want to give him the King gimmick. Savage will always make sense. DiBiase, main heel. Tito is the real odd one in that, especially in '89.
Exactly, yeah, because he was very much
in '89.
He was very much mid card. Yeah, fair enough. He beat Rick Martel in the final, so it had some relevance, I suppose. But again, there was nothing that would built up to something like that, or even came of it.
And that's the fact. The fact that they never referenced it made house shows feel so inconsequential. Like I remember watching the weekly TV where they would always have the event center discussing house shows.
Yeah. And
you couldn't help but think, I watched the weekly TV. I know that Dino Bravo is going to be wrestling Ken Patera at the Moncton Coliseum on Thursday, May 13th. But I also know that they never referenced it. They never talked about anything with the odd MSG. And that was only once in a while. Like rarely did they ever mention anything that happened that wasn't on Superstars Challenge. Hell, they didn't even mention anything that was on Primetime.
No, I look at that event center. Actually, I forgot about that until I started watching some of these old shows back, and they've kept them in there. And it was an interesting thing. Like I say, they were discussing matches that hardly anyone else that's probably watching that, or a good percentage of people watching that, wouldn't see, and then they wouldn't actually tell you what happened. It had no bearing on what was happening, what you're watching.
Yeah, it was kind of like non-canon.
Yeah,
but it was something that as a fan you enjoyed, because those types of matches between named superstars didn't happen that often, except for your odd feature match, which was usually telegraphed. Like, you could tell that Akeem was probably going to beat Coco Beware.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But because it wasn't Akeem against Jim Powers or Chris Duffy, you're like, okay, well, I'm interested in this now.
Yeah. So then we bring it more up to obviously, I think, which is more relevant to this is when King of the Ring really kind of exploded, when they decided in '93 they were going to put it out as give it its own pay-per-view.
Actually, before we discuss King of the Ring '93, Chris, I actually had a question for you.
Go on.
Fantasy book, what do you think happens if they did King of the Ring '92 a year before they did King of the Ring '93, following the same template of King of the Ring '93 and future King of the Rings, which means no champions in the tournament? Who do you have going over, and who do they go over in the finals?
It all depends, really, when it occurred.
June.
June, okay.
June '92.
So it wouldn't be Bret. See, my natural choice would have been Bret Hart at that point, because I think he was. Maybe I would say then possibly Shawn Michaels.
That's what I was thinking as well.
Yeah,
I think they would go with Shawn, and I think that with Shawn it would be kind of like when Owen won, not to get too far in the future, where they reference the crown and the robe more so than with Bret, because Bret wins the King, and he puts it on after he wins, and then he never has that robe or crown on ever again. No,
he doesn't take the gimmick on. They reference it at SummerSlam that year because he had that match with Jerry Lawler. But that was it. Apart from noting it as an achievement when they rattled off all of his title wins, I suppose, later on.
I think he would have been HBK, Heartbreak King.
HB King, I like it. Yeah, I like that. Wow, that would have stuck. And he could have had the crown in sort of in the hearts on his with
the hearts. Yeah, it would have been great.
I like it. Yeah, I definitely think he would definitely be up there. Who he would face in the final would probably be debatable. I'm not sure. Maybe someone like the Bulldog. Yeah.
Well, it depends what they're doing with SummerSlam. I mean, it does make sense. So they do tend to like to have somebody lose before they win a title, so that they have a ready-made angle for after that, which they wound up doing with Shawn anyway.
But I've never thought about King. Even looking through this, I've never thought about what if they did it in '92. Yeah, that would be.
Well, it's funny because I was watching a lot of Superstars from '92, and they had a completely different direction. It seemed like the company was going before they changed the location of SummerSlam. It seemed like where they were going was Bret and Shawn. They were going with Papa Shango and Ultimate Warrior. That they were going to go with Savage Flair in a rematch. That Davey Boy and Repo Man even had an angle going on.
Yeah,
and then everything changed. Like, nope, all that stuff that we've been building towards, house show, just house show.
Yeah, that's it. I remember I was given a VHS again by someone we knew had taped a load of Prime Time and All American Wrestling and that. And yeah, those angles, I remember the Bulldog and Repo Man one, and then it never came to anything. And that would have been quite, as much as I didn't think Repo Man was that exciting back then, that was a good feud they were building up there, really.
Yeah, it is like I mentioned before. If you're on TV, take advantage of the time that they give you, regardless of how much time. And Repo Man kind of did that, because I don't see too many people referencing Lance Cassidy, but people will reference Repo Man.
Yeah, exactly. It's memorable. Absolutely. Whether it's the look of him or what, some people think it's hammy. Fair enough, it was, but he got a shot, and he got on these big pay-per-views, back then as well. So there must have been something in it. He was a good heel to have, some of your upcoming babyface to bounce off of, I think.
He was. Now, going back to '93, were you watching at the time the TV? Were you watching?
No, I was literally just seeing the the pay-per-views and I got the magazines. That was really my point of reference. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, it must have been really weird seeing like where did this Mr. Hughes come from?
Yeah, see, I kind of knew of him from sort of WCW back then because I started to follow it, so I know he was there. But yeah, it's like, why is he there? How did he get into the King of the Ring? Firstly, because there was no reference in the magazines to the qualifying matches.
Oh, okay.
So I had no idea sort of what went on again until I've done research in sort of more recent years.
Have you watched the Mr. Perfect Doink series?
Yes, I have.
So good.
It's good. It's one that didn't excite me while I was watching the pay-per-view, and they did reference that one where he had to wrestle Doink 3 times, and I thought, Christ, I don't know if I can sit through 3 of those, let alone, one of those, let alone 3. But yeah, no, it was.
Well, I mean, if you really think about it, it's criminal that Doink, probably one of the MVPs of the first half of the year, had 2 pay-per-view matches, and only one of them were advertised.
Yeah. With him, he sort of crept in. These match against Brett at SummerSlam, I quite like.
But that was Lawler and Brett. Doink was a surprise. I love the Doink and Brett stuff, but the fact that you have this really hot heel, and he's not on the card for King of the Ring.
No.
Before SummerSlam, you think he's not there, and then the next thing you know, he's gone from the company.
Yeah, I do think the point of
the Rumble sure could have used him.
Oh, sorry.
I said the Rumble sure could have used him for some much-needed star power in that Rumble.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, could have done. I think when Matt Bourne stopped being Doink, that's when he really became just a real sort of wrestle crap kind of. I think it was good as a heel in some respect, but I do much prefer Matt Bourne. That sort of sadistic.
Oh, as opposed to the Ray Apollo, or I don't know.
Yeah, Ray
Babyface Doink is awful. It's absolutely the worst thing.
He had an edge as a bad guy, really, because it was just one of those things you shouldn't boo a clown. You didn't like.
Right, and I think if Matt Bourne would have been the babyface, I think it would have gotten over, kind of like Undertaker as a babyface. You may not have thought, oh, how's a dead guy going to get over as a babyface? But I think Matt Bourne could have made Doink work as a babyface, targeting heels like Bam Bam Lawler.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, actually, that I quite liked. I was quite entertained with Bam Bam Bigelow back here, and again, we will reference him in a bit because he was a massive part of the first pay-per-view anyway. And I love seeing the feuds that he was in, but the Doink one, I kind of thought, how did it stretch on that long? How did it go from Survivor Series pretty much through to WrestleMania and still hold substance?
Well, I mean, if you think about it, Jake the Snake Roberts and Andre the Giant, I think their feud started in October of '88 and then climaxed at WrestleMania 5. So it was a time when you could stretch things just by giving people a little taste. It helps when you don't have 3 hours of TV a week on one show and then 2 hours on another one.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that might be one of the reasons why concepts like this would probably not do as well nowadays.
Because you don't get Nasty Boys every week on TV, but the 3rd or 4th week when they're on there, you're reminded, oh yeah, they exist, and so you could conceivably stretch out angles and feuds.
Exactly. So let's get in and let's talk about the '93 one. We can bounce around. We don't have to do this chronologically, but this is kind of where I wanted to start digging into the pay-per-view side, because naturally it was the first one. It's the first one I remember. Just get your opinion really on which year was your favorite when it was a pay-per-view.
93.
Okay.
There's no contest. Even if you look at it from a kayfabe sense, who did Brett beat in the first round?
Razor Ramon in this one.
Who did Owen beat in the finals?
I made these links as well. I thought that was great. And it's good to show where Razor Ramon progressed over that year as well by getting to the final. But that link where the Hart brothers both did another.
And Owen just does it not quite as impressively as Brett. So it works within the story that they were telling.
It does. I think looking at the later years, the star power you had actually in the tournament in the '93 one far surpassed any others. '94.
There was multiple winners that you could envision. It's kind of like any given year with a Rumble. There's 30 men entered, but usually there's at maximum 6 guys that you could envision main eventing the Mania. As soon as they made that the stipulation, it really took away some of the intrigue. You weren't going to have another Big John Studd victory.
No, that's true. No.
But with King of the Ring, by not having it until 95, of course, it was just pretty much its own thing. There was the possibility that, hey, maybe they are going to put Mr. Hughes over and make him a big monster heel to face Undertaker. Maybe Duggan will have a big redemption arc, although honestly, he was the guy that had the smallest chance of winning.
Yeah. The interesting, I mean, the Bret Hart run, I'm again a massive Bret Hart fan, so I absolutely love seeing the story he tells, or the story they tell through that tournament with him. I think I watched the event a couple of weeks ago again, and I absolutely love it because, again, the commentary as well. Bobby Heenan does a great job of just telling everyone how banged up he is by the final. You know, all these injuries that he's accrued through the night, through his 3 matches, and the fact that you think of Bret as the underdog in the final.
You do. And also what I love about it, and to a lesser extent the next year, is that it had a sense of attrition because you had first round, second round, semifinals, finals. As soon as they made it so that it was just the semifinals and finals, it didn't seem like as big of a deal. And I get it. Austin 316 says, you know,
I was going to say exactly that. I was so disappointed when in '96, because again, I really, really looked forward to the King of the Ring. I loved when they used to start with the qualifying matches and everything. And then when I learned that actually only the semis and the final were going to be, I was like, what's the point of having an event called King of the Ring when actually only 3 matches?
It's like Survivor Series 92 when you only have 1 Survivor Series match. How can you even call the show Survivor Series?
It's just, you're just literally clinging onto the name and making some. That's when it really did start to. I was always interested in it, but it started to lose. You know, it wasn't special anymore after that.
Yeah. Plus, you had the introduction of the in your houses, so it really
just watered
down the concept of pay-per-views. So there was only a couple of years where King of the Ring was one of the big 5. After that, Big 12.
It's just that, But one of the other interesting points, one of the other interesting things in the '93 one that I quite like is the match with Tatanka and Lex Luger, because they were both undefeated. And it's like, okay, one of them is going to get beat. Who would it be? And then obviously they kind of did out with a draw anyway.
You know, if anybody ever complains that Brock Lesnar was the one to end Undertaker's WrestleMania streak, just remind them that at least they did something with Brock Lesnar. They had Tatanka undefeated for like 2.5 years, and Ludwig Borga never wrestled the match on pay-per-view after he beat.
No.
Well, actually, no, he had the Survivor Series.
But that was it. I know he got into. I quite like hearing the story of what was supposed to happen with him had he not got injured, because the Undertaker was meant to win the title at the Royal Rumble. Ludwig Borga was meant to beat the Undertaker for the title in between the Royal Rumble and WrestleMania, and then go on to WrestleMania to face Lex Luger.
See, I don't know if that would have worked. It's kind of like
it wouldn't have been as good.
In Mick Foley's book, when he talked about Mark Marrow getting a large contract in Austin and him being very bitter about it because they were higher up in WCW than Johnny B. Bad was, and you're pretty much paying for potential. And with Borga, those plans that you're mentioning, I never saw that in the presentation of Borga. I didn't see that world beater. There's guys that are undeniable, that you see the charisma that they have, you see that the reaction that they get from crowds, and if you don't push them, you need to get fired, you need to lose your job. Whereas with Borga, it was I'm not saying he was forced, but he could have just as easily been a berserker type push.
Yeah.
And the fans wouldn't have been calling for the heads of Pat Patterson and Tony Garea.
Would have fit, still would have been believable in a sense. How are they going to justify him beating the Undertaker when at that point nobody else could, really? You know.
Well, I mean, in that era, there was a lot of hokiness. I mean, look how Yoko beat him. He beat him with the weight of 28 million people. So anything's possible.
The point I absolutely love, and again, I was reminded of this the other day, is during that match at the Royal Rumble, what they got like 10, 15 guys out there beating on The Undertaker. Not
Taker's
one,
the biggest dick in the world. Nobody,
yeah,
no fun.
but exactly. Not one person came down. You know, the amount of fan favorites backstage, not one of them came out.
Well, it's kind of like how Jesse used to say on commentary, what's the point of having Elizabeth, Gino? She's not going to help.
No, that's absolutely.
Like, what's the point of having Paul Bearer? He's just going to look at the urn.
But they were, they fit. They were back then. You didn't need to know that they were going to get involved in that sense, really.
Yeah, it worked. I mean,
yeah.
Taker stuff was it always kind of felt separated from the rest of the stuff.
Yeah.
But King of the Ring 93, I loved the fact that it kind of was like a better version of WrestleMania 4 in that you had non-tournament matches that had some intrigue, either titles or angles, and including a world title change at the very first King of the Ring.
Yeah, that's pretty big. So let's talk about the undercard then. And I thought, as undercards go on these King of the Rings, this was probably the strongest as well.
Easily. Well, I guess you can make a case for 98. How do you feel about the Hell in the Cell?
We'll get there. It's iconic. I didn't feel at the time. I mean, that moment, obviously, that whole event is only going to be remembered really for that one. That one match, but that moment, that time just stopped. I think for everyone, like something real has just gone down there. But they're carrying on with it. What else is going to happen? I don't know. I'm not as massively taken by it as a lot of people are. And
same. I'm not into the stunt shows. I want to watch professional.
No, that's it. And I think as the event goes, as King of the Ring goes, it really did. The tournament wasn't really that strong anyway, but nobody even remembers. I was trying to think now of who won it. Ken Shamrock won it. Yeah, and in a good final. A good final with him and The Rock. Really, it was again a sign of that time. Probably a perfect final. That there'd been a story brewing there since the year before anyway. With those two, it's just
the fact that Mabel was the last guy to use the crown and the robe after it really spelled doom for the King of the Ring concept.
Yeah, definitely. I know Triple H, he should have done really. He wore it in that, didn't he? After it, it really, really just fit. But then he went on to a few months later. DX, so it really didn't fit in with that, I suppose. But that had he won it in '96 like he was supposed to, he would have carried that through.
I think so, because at that point he was. I don't know. I've always found Triple H a boring Steve Regal impersonator. I thought I'd rather watch a better version of what he's trying to do than ever watch Paul Levesque.
It was a little more over the top. It was a bit of a muted character, I felt, but it was a little more over the top and exaggerated than Steve Regal.
Oh, he would have absolutely had the crown, and if not for Shamrock, it would have felt like a heel heavy pay-per-view, not counting Brett, of course.
Yeah.
They needed to show that. They need to have that to just add some intrigue in that it's not going to be a heel win every year, but the fact they don't do anything with it afterwards kind of makes it feel like you could have just called this best wrestler of the night tournament.
Yeah. I 93, it had that real sort of passion about it. 94,
hot crowd too. A hot crowd too. Like denying the crowd was into it.
Yeah. Okay. Before we go on to 94, here's a question then. Something I was thinking about. So back then, so the first 2 years, the title match was sandwiched right in the middle of the card, pretty much. So it wasn't the closer. They, in a way, reserved that spot for the final. They did have a little bit of a black mark.
Oh, don't forget Lawler and Piper.
Yeah, it's probably best forgotten. But they, what's your thinking of putting the world title match in that position in the middle? Was it a good thing to do, or should they have left it to the end?
No, I think it worked because it made the King of the Ring the thing that was special. It's kind of like Survivor Series 91. You have Taker beating Hogan, but it's not the last thing that the fans see. No. It's still a match in the middle of a bigger thing. It was like how I always thought Royal Rumble was it 97 when Shawn and Sid ended it instead of the Rumble?
Yeah.
Bullocks, as you guys would say.
I love it. But in 96 they did that with Bret and the Undertaker. And
that was also awful.
It was,
you can't follow a Rumble with a match.
No, the crowd.
I can't imagine the type of match that it would have to be in order to follow a Rumble. And anything short of somebody being set on fire, it's not going to have the crowd on their feet like they are at 5, 4, 3, 2.
No, that's it. And by that point, I mean, the fans are probably exhausted after seeing an hour-long Royal Rumble. They're not going to be into. I mean, the 97 title match wasn't great anyway. The Bret Taker one at least had a little bit of intrigue in it.
Yeah, but it had the same feel of an exhausted crowd watching two wrestlers try to get something out of a crowd that's just not having it. And King of the Ring had the right idea. You don't have that monster pop for Bret you don't have that same reaction for a Yoko title win at the end of King of the Ring 93. And I don't know if there would have been a King of the Ring 94 if that would have been the last thing that fans would have seen.
Maybe not. That's an interesting thought. Could that have been the only standalone one? I think that everything about 93 was perfect. I cannot fault that one at all. And the fact that Hogan lost the title just put the cherry on the cake, really, because it was a good time to do it. They were bringing Bret forward again after I understand why they probably took the belt off him at WrestleMania, but the way it was that I kind of think, he'd had a good run, but they were trying to get over. I mean, Vince has always had this thing about monster heels, I suppose, and they had one they had to make. But they made him broke him in one fell swoop. Because I think that...
I would have no problems with Yoko beating Bret if he would have just stayed a monster heel, and then Bret, eventually gets his win back the following year. And I honestly think the Luger thing works in Bret's favor. It's kind of like with Daniel Bryan, the whole Yes movement. Would it have had the same impact at WrestleMania 30 if they wouldn't have given him so many start-stop pushes beforehand? With Bret, it was the same thing. By Royal Rumble 94, there was no way that crowd was going to cheer for Luger over Bret because Bret was their guy.
They've done that. They had a perfect chance to kind of launch Lex Luger and try him as world champion at SummerSlam. I never quite understand.
The fact that people, bitch about modern WWE booking, it's not a new thing. They've always had issues with, if you want to get somebody over, you can't just take the rug out from them. You have to go full throttle, and you get Luger over by having him beat Yoko. But as soon as he celebrates a count-out win, you've made him impotent, and the fans will never buy him.
I still cannot understand why that warranted such a win. I saw the front page of the magazine. Obviously, I didn't know. So I saw the front page of the magazine when the review came out, and I thought he'd won the belt because it's just like him on the Steiner shoulders, and it's just someone out.
But honestly, it was the era of the dumb baby face. The
true.
Would always was that three? Yeah, three. And that's why fans love Bret, because Bret was never presented as a dumb babyface. He was in the same company with Hacksaw Jim Duggan and the Bushwhackers and people who celebrate count-out wins like it's a world title win. So he always had that believability, and he always felt like the home team. And so crowds... I'm sick of people saying that Bret was only over in Canada or Germany. Bret was over wherever he went.
Everywhere,
Fans bought him, and they bought into the Bret Hart story. If Bret was in a match, people weren't on their way to the concession stand. They realized, okay, this is something I'm going to pay attention to. And that's why having him go 3 separate matches, 3 different matches, including the middle one, which is the best match of the night.
Absolutely. To have that, to have a rematch of Bret and Mr. Perfect, some people probably could have looked at the brackets and thought, well, it's a possibility, but there's no way that they would put that in there. There's no way at that point they would have them facing each other, surely, because they're both good guys, and it didn't really happen all that much there.
Well, especially after that cock tease of WrestleMania 4 with the Savage and Steamboat. Like, it could happen.
Exactly,
It doesn't.
It doesn't, and you kind of think you've had Bret and Perfect then, and it's not going to happen again. And I mean, that was a final worthy match, really.
It was.
If that had been the final, that would have been amazing.
Although you run the risk of splitting the crowd.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, and I don't think I was as invested in a King of the Ring final as much as I was with Brett and Bam Bam, because it was typically you want Brett to win, at least I did. But when he's against Bam Bam Bigelow, who's only wrestled once, they had that perfect bit in the middle where he didn't have to wrestle that second match. He's got a mountain to climb to beat this guy. And then there's again that false finish where you think Bam Bam's won it. And
heels get buys. Baby faces do not get buys.
No.
And any tournament where you have a baby face getting a buy, then the booker doesn't know what they're doing. You might as well have the baby faces win the coin toss on a War Games.
like they do. So then let's move on to 94 then, because I feel these first two are really the ones that should have set the pace for the King of the Ring being more massive than it was. I mean, when you watch these first two shows, two letdowns for 94 for me.
Well, how much did King of the Ring 94 weigh, do you know?
I don't know. What do you mean?
Well, if you remember, the commentator, Art Donovan, was very curious about the weight.
Oh, yes, I remember. See, that's one of my letdowns. Is firstly, Lawler and Piper. I don't even know if we'll waste any time on this show discussing that one too much, because it was awful. The finish was awful. They had a good story.
Everything about it was bad.
Yeah, neither one, I think, should have been anywhere close a finishing match on that.
Yeah, that would have been like King of the Ring 93. The last match have been either Crush and Shawn or the 8-man tag match. It didn't make any sense because it wasn't a hot enough angle to warrant being the final match. Like, if you're going to do that, do Brett and Diesel. But I get you can't do that considering what happens.
Exactly. Yeah, you had to. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they apart from that last match, again, they had pretty much a perfect card in my opinion. But Art Donovan is the one thing that ruins that entire show. I mean, it's funny. It's funny, but why? You got to ask why. Why?
My better half is the type of person who really likes watching bad movies, whereas I'm not. I feel if I'm going to sit in front of a screen for any amount of time, it has to be worth it. I don't feel that life is long enough to watch bad things. So I'm not one of these, it's so bad it's good. It's so bad it's bad. Art Donovan's commentary brings that whole show down.
I mean, obviously, yes, Vince obviously had something to do with it, but why bring a guy in who clearly has no idea about what he's got to talk about?
You know why I honestly believe?
Go on.
You're not getting 100% of Vince's brain and capacity because he kind of was preoccupied with something else.
True. Yeah, a little something going on at that point, I suppose. But
so I honestly think that there was a lot of misses during that era just because you're not getting his full concentration. Now, as an excuse for the year after, I don't know if you have one.
95, just start to finish. I did a whole show on 95 at the beginning of this podcast when I started it, because there's so much to cover that was wrong.
It's the worst show I've ever seen.
Yeah, it is. It is. So you compare that. I mean, you compared 94 to 93. The tournament itself, it was strong. You still had guys like Razor and Bam Bam Bigelow. It's just unfortunate that Bam Bam just got taken out so early.
Also, the match of the night was in the second round.
Which would be
Owen and 1, 2, 3 Kid. That was the best sub 5-minute match in the history.
I was going to say, don't say Razor and IRS because
no. They thought it was opener.
But it was good. And the way again they were building up the 1, 2, 3 Kid as would he even come out because he got an injury from the first one, and then he comes out, he's like a hero. So again, you wonder whether he could do the upset again, which would set up a final with Razor Ramon, which would have been quite good. Wouldn't have been as
It was
good.
a very well booked show in that you could. There were several conceivable ways that they could go in the finals.
And the way they did it and putting Owen over was perfect for that timeline. Again, I did a show about 94, and the one thing that is my favourite throughout that whole year is the Brett and Aaron, because it just carries through. There is a thread that goes through the entire middle of that year, and it's them.
Carried the whole promotion.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, other than the ladder match at Mania, which was really just a one-off, because after that it transitions to Diesel. So 94 is the Brett and Owen show. With Backlund, I guess, in the latter half of the year.
Yeah, that was I don't understand. I still don't understand how he got into that position, really.
Well, have you seen the Superstars match?
Is that the one, like the first one they had?
Yeah, where Backlund turns heel?
Where turns heel, yeah.
That is a low-key match of the year candidate. That, along with Brett against Kidd, and Mania against Owen, and I'm not the biggest fan of the cage match at SummerSlam, but I mean Brett was on fire all year.
He was. That cage match, I thought, was. It's a shame they decided to really end the Brett Owen bit there. I know it carried on a little bit afterwards, but sort of as far as the main event thing, because they brought the family into it, and there was more that could be done. I mean, if he wasn't defending the title at Survivor Series, they could have had a really cool Survivor Series match.
I think the only way it would have worked is if you reverse Neidhart and Davey Boy, because Davey Boy would have more cachet for the crowds as far as being a big bad, whereas Neidhart had a lot of history with Brett, but nobody was going to buy the Anvil beating Brett. But people could have bought Bulldog, especially considering what happened 2 years before.
Absolutely. Yeah, and they kind of teased that. Well, in a way, I know Jerry Lawler, when he interviewed the Bulldog in the crowd that night, he referenced that straight away. So you kind of think, maybe.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the match they had eventually at the end of 95 in your house with Bulldog and Brett, just, again, I did grow tired of the Bulldog by that point. The heel Bulldog in 95 didn't do anything for me. Eventually, he didn't have. You never thought he was going to win the belt, so why did they keep giving him a shot? But
it was he was a good B show contender. He wasn't going to carry a Mania or a SummerSlam, but these other pay-per-views that they are contractually obligated with the cable companies to have. He fills that niche pretty nicely without wasting a tentpole challenge.
Yeah, true. So what do you reckon of the undercard? I'm not going to do this with every single one, but I think the undercard to 94 was quite strong.
It was.
With Brett Diesel, when I saw that first advertised, it was another one of those heels against Bret Hart that I thought, oh my God, they could actually take him apart. It could be quite. I know. As a kid, you really do fear for these guys, but I thought there's someone there that could really probably take Brett out.
It was the first time throughout Kevin Nash's career where I didn't just view him as just a lanky wrestler who existed, because I was a WCW fan, so I did see him in the Master Blasters as Oz, as Vinny Vegas, and when he first came in as Diesel, and he was just very there. He was unimpressive. He was kind of like Diamond Stud before he found his way as Razor.
Yeah.
Diesel at the Rumble certainly made an impression to the point where they now have the Diesel spot pretty much every year or every other year in one of the Rumbles.
Yeah.
And him against Brett. Brett made him kind of like how Brett has made so many other wrestlers. He made him credible, and you bought it within the context of the match. Maybe not the build. Maybe even people beforehand, they thought, okay, well, this is just a guy, but Brett, in the context of the match, made you believe that, okay, this guy's for real.
Exactly, yeah. And there was points in that, especially, again, I really like the ending, the fact that he got the jackknife on him and you would never know whether Brett would have kicked out, and they carried that through for the next 18 months.
It worked.
Yeah.
Because Brett gave him the match of his career at Survivor Series 95. And some people may prefer Good Friends, Better Enemies, or Bitter Enemies, but I'm a Survivor Series 95.
I think that's the best one for sure. Yeah. It's again, I think it's the one with the better ending. Again, being a big Bret Hart fan, always was going to be, but it was just like that. You wondered all year whether.
Plus the ending was more in question. I never thought Diesel was beating Shawn 1 month after Shawn wins the title.
No,
I didn't think Brett was going to beat Diesel in Survivor Series 95.
No, that's true, and I think because they built Diesel all the way through 95. You kind of thought, well, who's going to beat him and how? Because he does seem to be sort of unstoppable in a sense.
It felt like they were gunning for Diesel Michaels at Mania 12, a rematch, but this time maybe with the roles reversed.
Yeah. Again, one of my favorite matches of all time is that Iron Man match. So I think nothing will ever compare in my mind to putting that one on. I don't know. It wouldn't have been as good a way for Michaels to have realised that boyhood dream, really.
True. Yeah, he needed to beat the guy that the fans viewed as the guy. And
absolutely.
Diesel's reign, nobody viewed him as the guy.
No, which brings us on. I mean, one other point about 94 one, actually, it was the first time that I saw the Head Shrinkers as champions and as good guys, which was really odd to me, having seen them for the rest of, quite some sort of vicious heel team. So and
they, of course, wrestled the third Head Shrinker.
They did, yes. Yeah. I've seen pictures of Yokozuna as Kokina when he had tryouts in the WWF in that same Samoa gear. It's interesting to think how things could have been different had they just slotted him into that team.
I'm sure he's glad that they decided to go.
Absolutely, yeah. But that was a semi-decent match, with Yokozuna and Crush. It's never believable, I think, that they were going to lose the belts to him. But how the mighty fall, I think, from 93 for Yokozuna to that match in 94.
But that's really the story of the promotion. I mean, look at King Kong Bundy. He main events Mania 2 and then Mania 3s and
it's a gimmick match, really, isn't it? Yeah. So let's bring us on to what is, in my opinion, anyway, the worst. Regardless of these other ones that they've done later on that don't really mean much. 95 is dire.
I don't want to count COVID era pay-per-views because that's just that they deserve their own category. But as far as like pay-per-views with crowds, I've never seen a worse one. From the booking to the matches to everything was off about January 95. And when I was a tape trader, that was probably the most requested tape I had. And I had to watch that multiple times for people. And I hated every one of them that requested.
But yeah, I mean, it was just an odd one. I think this is when it started, the brackets of the tournament started to get weaker. You had IRS in there again, but he didn't really do much the year before. Savio Vega, obviously, we know he was Quang, but he hadn't really proven himself at that point. Shawn Michaels was in it.
Yeah, Shawn Michaels, when I saw Undertaker. That. I mean, the way the brackets looked, it looked like in a best case scenario, you have two of your most over acts in the company meet in the finals, and instead you have Mabel against Savio Vega.
Yeah,
and people still kept their jobs. How?
Yeah, and you have the roadie get to the semis.
It was just a total gong show, and I've seen, and here's the thing: people be genuine, and you could tell it's not being snarky, they're not being ironic. People genuinely have a fondness for January 95 and 95 WF because that's when they get into it, and they can't stand back and just look at it objectively and say every other year was better. Absolutely. There was no year worse than 95.
Yeah, I've got a soft spot for it in a way because it was the first year that I started to be able to watch the weekly shows. So I remember a lot more about it from that. But I also remember the fact that, like you say, compared to either side, it was content-wise was just dire. It really was. The guys that they were pushing, I think the one notable thing about that year for me, again, that I mentioned in the show I did about 95, was the fact that Bret Hart spent the entire year in the mid-card, taking on new guys, Hakushi and John Pierre Lafitte and Isaac Yankem as well. Mm-hmm. It's like, what were they doing with him? They ended it well, but why was he there?
Honestly, I think it's because it would be like when Bob Backlund was the champion. You can't have Bruno Sammartino in a match right before Bob Backlund. Mm-hmm. You had to have Bruno and Bob separated by quite a few matches in between or in other cities at the same night. When you have Bret Hart in your company and then you have Diesel as the champion, people are like, why is this? Why are you force feeding Diesel, who's not over, who was over beforehand, but as soon as you make him smiley and change the whole character, no,
it's not the same, is it? If they put the belt on Diesel as a heel, maybe in 94, it's a completely different story. Yeah, people would have invested a bit more in it, I think. Because then
Or
you want
even
to see
if
him
you
do
have
something.
the Diesel character from late 95 into 96 or
Yeah.
the WCW Kevin Nash, I think the fans would have absolutely gravitated towards it because Nash, for all of his inability or whatever you want to say about him, there's no denying the fact that he comes across as cool.
No.
And he did not as Diesel. That's the only time in his career at that point where he was not cool.
No.
How do you do that? You do that through bad creative and an out-of-touch man who is still in charge.
But the really odd thing about 95 for me is there were so many changes around. So I turn my back for 1 minute and I get a glimpse of either one of the magazines or I even got a glimpse of a Monday Night Raw or something. And Shawn Michaels is a good guy, which was good. I enjoyed that. Sid is back. He's at the top of the card as well. Bam Bam Bigelow's a good guy. Men on the Mission are bad guys. It's like, what's gone on since I've been away, almost? And they're just positioning these really, really bad workers at the top, and just to work with each other. So it's never going to conjure up a good show, was it?
That stuff can work if Brett or Shawn are at the top and can work with them. Nash isn't carrying anybody. And the fact that you have him against Mabel, you have him against Sid, I mean, that title reign was just a recipe for disaster because it may have started off all right with the Brett match, but I mean, think about it. And Shawn at Mania. And then to go from Brett and Shawn to Sid and Mabel and to Tonka and Davey Boy, who was always a passenger in good matches, never the ring general. It's
you're not building him up to be this really impressive champion when you put him against mid-card guys or at best. And I think with the Mabel thing, fair enough, the talent that was in the tournament, we said about The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels. I guess the best thing they could have done with that maybe is for have what you said about 92. Have Shawn Michaels win it. Use that as a bit of a platform for him now to jump towards the world title.
Well, I mean, 95 was kind of the build-up of Shawn. It was all about building Shawn all year. From, a tough but valiant loss at Mania to being betrayed by his bodyguard to winning the IC title to having a match against a guy that he wrestled the year before in what some people considered the match of the year in a rematch, but getting his win back to being knocked out and having concussion issues. It was really the Shawn Michaels show all year. He was the main character if 95 was a movie. And to have him be such an afterthought in the King of the Ring pay-per-view just showed that they did not really know what they were doing. And it felt like a booker who just had names in a hat and shook it up and just did that. And that's no way to work. You have to work back to front.
They had the perfect opportunity to rescue that event if they had used him, really. I mean, what did they do? Was it was a double count out or a time limit draw or something with Karma?
Time limit draw with Karma.
Time limit draw, yeah. So again, that was the one that gave Mabel the bye. Like we said again, the heels get the bye. You just didn't have the fan favorite that could beat him in the final. Really?
No, and I think if you would have had a Razor or a Taker or someone of that caliber, then maybe Mabel's victory would have seemed like a bigger deal. But him beating Savio Vega, a guy who, all the talent in the world, but he never connected with the WWF's audiences the way that type of push would warrant. I mean, even 1, 2, 3 Kid would have been more over. It would have been akin to like having Bob Holly in the finals. It just wouldn't have worked.
No, and you look at
especially in Philly.
True, absolutely. Yeah, never thought of that. But you look at what Mabel did then. So he went on to have a title match. So that kind of winning it meant something. They built that into the storyline. Savio Vega wasn't even on SummerSlam.
I think he wrestled Owen Hart. Oh no, wait, that was next year.
That was the next year, yeah. So he was on In Your House too, where him and Razor went up against Men on a Mission. So they continued that, I suppose. But then by SummerSlam, he ain't got a place. So it's like, why have him in that final match, really, when you're going to do absolutely nothing with him immediately after? But
it just goes to show you that there was no cohesive long-term plan. Now, it's possible that there may have been all sorts of other things that we as the fans aren't aware of, like the idea of trusting Razor in a spot like that, knowing his demons, and
Yeah,
so
true.
maybe Savio felt like a safer alternative. But Taker was right there, and Taker's kind of bulletproof. You can beat Taker, and he still maintains his aura because you can always have him beat by shenanigans.
That was the only thing I think that Mabel had going for him on that night, is that he beat the Undertaker and it was an upset. Fair enough, karma was involved as well, but maybe they hoped that would give Mabel the credibility to win it. I think it backfired. I just don't think he should have been there. But
if it happens in Des Moines, Iowa, maybe it's different. But the fact that it happens in Philly, it just shows you how tone deaf and how persistent that the WWF can be, that we're doing it our way. And that was one of the main reasons why the whole COVID Thunderdome era is so rough to watch, because you don't have the fans poo-pooing on their bad ideas. So they just run with what they want to do. So you see what would happen if the fans aren't there to change things, to get them out of their own heads.
But so we move on to a nicer time the following year. They did kind of redeem it a little bit, but this was the first year. Did we mention that they didn't have the first round?
Yeah, and it really watered it down, and it made it seem less prestigious.
Yeah,
and I get it that in hindsight everyone talks about the promo, but he wasn't even on SummerSlam. So
exactly. He was on the pre-show in a 1-minute match against Yokozuna, who broke the ring again, and it was just, it's not something that's going to catapult him right up where he
it was Brett. If not for Brett, 96 Austin was just kind of floundering. He was just a guy on the card, and he had that promo, and there were some signs, and there may have been some traction in some of the more smarkier towns, but it wasn't until the Brett feud that he really took off.
No. He was chiseling out the character, wasn't he, really? And maybe the fact that there was so little that they did with him after that shows that they weren't expecting to put him there, because the plan was for Triple H to win it until the
plus Austin at that time was not the conventional guy that you could picture being pushed heavily in the WWF. He didn't have that larger-than-life persona. And I don't even care that he wasn't built like Sid. This is a company that pushed Savage because Savage was undeniable. Austin's talent was eventually undeniable, and I'm not just saying this to be a hipster fan, but I remember in 1994, Steve Austin was my favorite wrestler in the world, because he just had a way of just bumping so violently that you would just have your eyes on the screen, and I was just fixated on mid-card WCW titles and champions. They
meant something back then because of guys like him.
Exactly.
Really. But I wasn't a big fan of Steve Austin in '96. I think when they brought him in as the ringmaster, it was like, okay, we'll see where this goes, because he's got the $1 million belt, and it was kind of interesting. But then I don't know, he was boring. I'm going to say that there was nothing visually about him that was exciting. He didn't really do a lot in the ring that got me interested. So
the thing is, he was in a company with people that could do what he was doing, only that they were over. So what was the point of having him? And I get you're building newer talent, but the way that they were presenting wrestling in '96, there's no wonder NWO and WCW took off, because it was such a tired presentation. It just looked bland.
Yeah. It's when you get to the King of the Ring, and Austin wins it. It didn't excite me at all. I was like, okay.
Well, he beat way over the hill Jake Roberts, exactly. And I get it. If not for Jake, there's no Austin 316.
No.
But man, it would have been so much better if it was even like 4 years before.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's one of those where in '93 it could have gone either way with Brett and Bam Bam, really. Same with '94. But '96, when you saw he was up against Jake, it's like they were building it as more this kind of resurgence.
Imagine Austin and Vader in the finals, which could have happened. Yeah. And instead you get Austin and
Jake Roberts, where you kind of predict where it's going to go. Yeah. You knew then where it was going to go. Yeah, they were building up Jake Roberts to be this kind of returning hero. Could have been a dream for him to win it and that. But seeing where he ended '96, I mean, it wouldn't have been a good idea for them to have put him over in that anyway, because they would have just wasted it. But it's a bit of a disappointing one. That's when the event started to mean less.
Absolutely.
They started cutting.
After that, it never really felt like at any point in the history of King of the Ring was it the best event in the year. In '93, no question in my mind, it was their best show that they put it in the year. '94, I think Mania 10 was better than '95. No chance. And after that, like any given year, I can't envision saying King of the Ring was the best show that year.
No, it says it all with '96, with the '96 one. That I think one of my favourite bits about it at the time was when Ahmed Johnson won the Intercontinental title. Looking back on it now, it's laughable, but it was a big thing. I quite liked him back then. He was this kind of.
Well, he wasn't yet injured weekly.
No, exactly. He was impressive going into it, and again, you wanted him to win. The Shawn Michaels Bulldog one was. Again, they done it the second pay-per-view in a row. It wasn't.
Nobody cared.
No. Again, I didn't believe I didn't believe Bulldog was going to win it, and that's the thing. You kind of like.
Well, look at it like this. In June of '95, when King of the Ring '95 was happening, WCW had Great American Bash '95 that nobody really cares or remembers. In June of '94, they didn't have anything. They had a Clash. Same with June of '93. In June of '96, while WF was putting on King of the Ring, they were like the seeds were there for the biggest thing at that time since Hulkamania. Yeah, with the NWO, and that's what everyone was talking about. If you were a professional wrestling fan, you weren't discussing King of the Ring '96 with your buddies. You weren't talking about, are you going to be watching Raw? Are you excited for the Savio Vega Goldust match? Are you excited for Bob Holly and TL Hopper? Nobody cared.
No, it's almost like they weren't even competing. Yeah, I guess the WWF was just not prepared for what was going to happen over the other side. I'm reading the book Nitro at the moment, which is all about sort of the rise and fall of WCW from like a business perspective. And I mean, it's put a whole new spin on it for me, really, as to sort of what was going on. I think 96.
It was also for me personally. It was the first full year I was online.
Oh, wow,
so
okay.
Prior to that, my knowledge of wrestling was through the magazines and through actually watching it. And then as soon as you start interacting with other wrestling fans from all over the world that are observer subscribers and let you in on some of the inside terms, and you start finding out that's who Shawn Michaels' Knights were at Survivor Series. And like that was the stuff that I was really interested in, finding out who the masked wrestlers were, finding out that the execution was Bloody Rose at Mania 1. That was unusual to me.
Yeah, and I was led to believe, I don't know why I ever believed this was true, but I was led to believe Bret Hart was the executioner at WrestleMania 1.
Oh, really? I can see it, he had that type of gear during that time.
And I was like, wow, he was there at the beginning and nobody knew it. And no, he wasn't.
No, I just thought he was just like a job guy. And when I first got online, that was what I was looking at. And I remember when King of the Ring '96 was happening, there was no buzz about anything that WF was doing. Like you had your hardcore WF fans and Vince fans who would, of course, always discuss it. But as far as what the masses were talking about, they were always discussing WCW. It always seemed like it was far more interesting that anything could happen. I know WF would always talk about anything could happen, but nobody bought that. It was, it always seemed very rehearsed and everything just felt, I shouldn't say that, nothing felt spontaneous. It just, everything felt pre-planned. With WCW, everything felt, was this
all of a sudden you didn't know.
Just now?
Yeah, you did not know what's going to happen, and all of a sudden that was exciting, And it took WWF a couple of years to kind of come around to find the one crucial element they needed to turn it around. But so I wasn't going to go chronologically, but we are sort of naturally following that, so that's fine. I'll go with it. 97. I'd be hard pushed to remember. Yeah, except for Triple H winning it, which obviously he, again, should have done. So it's almost like he just kind of, he paid his dues for a year and then he got his prize. It was a good final. It started getting a little more kind of hardcore than the years before, really, with his match with Mankind.
And if you remember, Triple H was beat in a qualifying match, and he was a replacement for someone. I can't remember who.
That's right, yeah.
So he was the guy that I thought had the least amount of chance of winning.
Yeah, but didn't he lose to, like, I can't think who he lost to there. Yeah, you're right. You just reminded me of that.
Yeah, so that was really out of left field for me. So I wasn't expecting Triple H to win, and because I was never high on him dating back to his Terror Rising days. He was just a guy on the card. And it also began a long tradition of King of the Ring within the King of the Ring being inconsequential and something else within the card being the main takeaway. It was the Austin Michaels against Bulldog and Owen match at King of the Ring 97. For me, that was the thing that really stood out.
Yeah.
And then
it was meant to be, wasn't it? But then they changed it to Austin against Michaels, which, as the tag champs at the time, it's like, okay, interesting, but it's got no substance to it. Why are you doing it? You know. But
also, that was a cursed card too, because if you remember, there was a lot of matches that were announced before, and I think Austin was supposed to face Pillman, and Brett was supposed to face Michaels, and then all of a sudden,
that's right. Yeah. They were bigging that up. I don't know how Brett and Michaels would have really fared on the King of the Ring card, to be honest with you.
I'm sure it would have been trademark Bret Hart, a schmoz at the end, but it would have been a hell of a match because those guys were. It's impossible for them not to have a good match.
Yeah, true. Except if you count Montreal, but that's another show.
Yeah, that's another show.
But yeah, sort of thing. I'm trying to think of what else happened on that show. To be honest with you,
it's very forgettable, which is odd because '97 is my favorite year in the history of the company.
Interesting.
And the King of the Ring was just like it. Yeah. Look what came after it. The best pay-per-view in the history of the company, in my opinion, Canadian Stampede, which people look back fondly, and I never see people discussing King of the Ring 97 unless it's one of those on this day, this happened. And people, I remember that now.
Yeah, a bit of a footnote sort of thing. I think the only thing to take away from it it's where Triple H started to elevate. You know, in that sense, the King of the Ring probably did mean something because it pushed him further up the ladder where...
So bitter. If ever there was a reason for a show to be eliminated from consciousness, it's if it helped push Triple H.
True.
Do you really need that?
No. I get it's an odd thing that they started to do. Yes, it grew into something really memorable, but when they started pairing Triple H with Shawn Michaels, not long after this, I thought, I can't buy this because I didn't buy Shawn Michaels as a fully fledged heel after SummerSlam. You know, I kind of thought it got mixed up in something that it wasn't supposed to be and it would all filter out. It wasn't probably until Bad Blood.
That's probably because you're not Canadian, Chris. We view Shawn as a heel pretty much from the jump.
Fair enough. I forgot. So yeah, it was an odd part of the year. It was a few months after that was the event that I got to see over here in the UK, which was in September of that year. So it's kind of riding off of stuff that started from the King of the Ring kind of time, I suppose. But it wasn't until after that really Austin started to take off a little bit more in another direction. You know, it wasn't just with Bret Hart, and yeah. Gold Dust and Crush. There we go. That's one match that came up into my head from that show.
Wow, you're better than me because I've watched Killer 97 a few times and I don't remember anything about it other than Triple H winning.
Here's a good yardstick then. Anytime you've got a King of the Ring with Jerry Lawler in the semi-finals, something's wrong.
True.
Yeah,
it's 100% true.
Yeah,
because it's not Memphis. I mean, it's not the 80s. Like Lawler and WF was always presented as kind of
just a comedy act, wasn't it?
Yeah. Comedy.
Yeah, I mean the match he had at 95 with Bret. I mean, again, dire card, but a kiss my foot match.
Wasting the Hitman.
Again, that's all 95 was about was that, and that's just it just so happens that caliber of a match was in there. You couldn't blame the fact that 95 was so bad when they were churning things like that out.
If anything, you start to question how Brett could think he wouldn't get screwed at Survivor Series 97
Yeah.
after all the stuff he's been put through.
Absolutely, yeah. So then we move on to the next year, which 98, again, as I said at the beginning, is probably remembered. It's not even remembered for the tournament. It's remembered for that one moment. Again, I don't remember the entire match because there's not much of a match that really goes on, but that one moment.
2 moments.
2 moments, when he goes through the ceiling. Yeah. It's hearing that's. It's good that there is that memory that links people back to a King of the Ring, I suppose. But for me, it's not for the reason it should be. The King of the Ring for me should always be about the tournament. But
yeah, I mean, the Undertaker Mankind could have had that match In Your House, Cold Day in Hell, or they could have had that match at an Unforgiven or a Judgment Day. It didn't have to be at a King of the Ring.
No, it seemed like a bit of an odd one, but again, it fit with the storyline, I suppose. Plus, I did think at the time they're just trying to recycle a feud which was 2 years old. It was good.
Plus, you had the first title reign of a mayor.
That's very true. Yeah, see, I forget that as well.
Yeah, really, because it's so overshadowed. It followed the Hell in the Cell. I mean,
yeah, and it only lasted 1 day, so you could be forgiven for forgetting that one. But it was a shocking moment. Nobody really predicted or expected that to happen. Footage of it still plays on today. They still talk about it. It's got
a meme.
Story to it. Yeah.
Oh my God, he's broken in half.
Yeah, the commentary you can't. Again, Jim Ross in '98 had some cracking lines that still play on today. So, it did give us that.
My God.
I'm not even going to try, but it's it gave us that classic moment. It didn't really give us a lot else. Again, you reminded me earlier. Ken Shamrock won against The Rock. It was a good match. They had Dan Severn in there though, so I think they were teasing a Shamrock 7 final, weren't they?
Which would have been interesting to see how they would have worked that in front of a dead crowd. That
Quite exactly.
About anything Severn did.
No, he was just so. I didn't buy into. I wasn't a UFC follower at the time either, so I didn't really. I'd seen him pop up in some of the wrestling magazines that I was reading. Knew who he was. But
if he would have been in WCW or ECW or Smoky Mountain or AWA or WWF 5 years beforehand, I'm sure he would have had. But at that time, for that audience, let's face it, WWF audiences respond to characters. WCW crowds could be won over by work. I've seen fans not care about wrestlers when they have their introductions and are won over by spots and moves and technique within the match. I never saw that with WWF crowds. They would not care about somebody, and nothing they could do in the match would change that.
No. And I think 7 was too stiff for me. There was nothing. I mean, that's part of his sort of visage, I suppose. He just come deadpan, very focused. It just his style didn't fit. Where I know Ken Shamrock
didn't fit the promotion.
No, Ken Shamrock blended really well. I think he did that transition really well into wrestling. But 7. But I saw 7 doing a virtual signing a couple of months ago, and he actually said he was a wrestler before he was a cage fighter. He was the NWA champion, I believe, before he actually won the UFC. And I was like, I can imagine it in real sort of amateur kind of maybe the territory days, but
it would have been. He would have been like a Mike Rotunda, like not even IRS, but like a Mike Rotunda or a Brian Adias, like a guy with trunks and boots and knee pads and elbow pads. And that's fine and well, but that's mid card. That screams mid card. That's not champion.
And this is the Attitude Era as well in the WWF, where Steve Austin is on the top of the card in a First Blood match, which again, I was kind of like, how is he ever going to beat Kane? Because Kane's whole body and his face are covered. You would never know. So we knew what was going to happen there, in a way.
Well, we were deep into the bullshit era.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that they just turned it over again the following night, it's like, why do it? At least give him a month running with it to kind of build it up for a rematch. But we are kind of getting into the realms now.
Well, Chris, remember, they make moments.
They do. We don't, obviously. But we are getting into the time now where the King of the Ring really is so unrecognizable to me.
Yeah, inconsequential as well. I mean, just doesn't matter.
No, Ken Shamrock winning the tournament. Yeah, a few months later he'd be the Intercontinental Champion. Brilliant. It didn't really do a lot. I mean, The Rock came out of that, I think, better for losing. Really, I mean, his rise then for the rest of the year is insurmountable.
It was his SummerSlam '92.
Yeah, and then you get to, I can't even picture now the following years.
Well, '99 actually, I saw this at a nightclub because it was my first year of being legal. Like, I'm not sure what the legal drinking age is in the UK,
19.
but okay, 19 in certain provinces. In the province that I lived at the time, it was 19, and it was my first year being 19. And my birthday's in June, King of the Ring's in June. I remember going to see this and being psyched because the last show that I went to see at a bar was Canadian Stampede. And I didn't go to see any in '98 because I was always nervous that I would get ID'd and it would be a waste of going there just to be turned back. So my first one that I could go see legally was King of the Ring '99, and what a non-show.
So just trying to rack my brains now because I didn't want to research the whole thing. I wanted to really go off what was in here and what was in here from the King of the Ring.
You got the ladder match where the briefcase gets raised between
is that
Austin
the
and
ownership?
McMahon?
It's not the ownership. It's like the running of the WWF and then Steve Austin against McMahon. Okay.
Yeah. It was heavily implied that it was Boss Man who did it, but
no, I do remember that. Yeah, who won the tournament? I'm trying to think. That is this
Billy Gunn.
Billy Gunn.
Yeah.
Case in point,
talk about a forgettable year.
A tag team wrestler. He was, he had so much success in teams, and this was, I suppose, he's meant to be his breakout. And then if you look at, I know there was an event in between, but look at what he did at SummerSlam then.
Yeah, nothing.
No,
he was The Rock's female dog. Now, the King of the Ring '99 it's just dreadful, and that whole year, I know people look back fondly on it, but it's of the moment to go back and watch it. If you have a thing for 3-minute matches with non-finishes, then that's your jam.
Absolutely, yeah, and then sort of if we go on to, so my mind's becoming really hazy now because I stopped watching the King of the Ring 2000 was the last pay-per-view that I was able to watch sort of as it happened, because then we got rid of Sky cable at home, so that was the one. I do remember Kurt Angle winning that one. Am I thinking of the right year?
Yeah, but I don't remember much about it other than that. It was during that time when everything, with Raw being the way it was and SmackDown being the way it was, the pay-per-views kind of all bled together. And unless something really monumentous happened, I mean, I can tell you the qualifying matches for King of the Ring '93. I couldn't tell you who was in King of the Ring 2000. No. And that happened, 7 years later. I don't know. I know Angle won. Maybe he beat Edge.
Angle. So in 2000, Angle beat Rikishi in the final. Really? I mean, prior to that, I think Rikishi beat Chris Benoit in one of the earlier matches. You could have had Benoit and Angle. Maybe that was too obvious. Maybe that was too obvious. I have a feeling that was the year Crash Holly actually got to the semis as well. Crash Holly, Kurt Angle put Crash Holly out in the semis.
Yeah,
I think that's enough said on that one. Really.
How did I forget that?
Obviously. And 2001, I watched on a VHS probably about a year later. It was most known for the Shane Angle. That's it. Yeah,
crazy match. Nobody remembers Edge winning the King of the Ring.
No, which is a shame because I think that Final Four actually was told quite a story with Angle, Edge, Christian, and Rhino. I thought that was quite good because they were all together at the time as well, sort of as a band. Mm-hmm. And then Kurt Angle came back, and that was the match that everyone remembers for that again for one moment or one missed moment.
And that was Shane McMahon's career match, and I could see a case for it even being Angles. I know he's had some bangers, but man, talk about a memorable match.
Yeah, And again, at what point did the King of the Ring stop being about the King of the Ring tournament?
96.
96. Yeah.
I honestly think it was. Everything
why,
after that, it was all Survivor Series 92s. It was all.
Yeah. Why did they carry on with it? I mean, in the last, I don't know how many years, they've been flip-flopping pay-per-view names and themes and that like anyone's business. Why did they stick with something that really, the main part of it was just such an afterthought? Yeah.
I think it's because you have people who, like, Vince was never, like, I'm not in his inner circle, but from what I've been able to gauge from interviews, reading, everything, is that he's not the biggest fan of tournaments. And so it's kind of like how he's not the biggest tag team fan. So it's kind of an uphill battle to begin with.
Yeah,
so you need to have somebody who's really, pushing for it, that has some modicum of power. And I don't know if they've had that. I mean, you're not going to get that from a Russo during that era.
No.
You're not going to get that from people who are, have other main interests. It's not a WWF concept that I could see ever gaining much traction with the people that are in charge now and in the foreseeable future.
Interestingly, the first and only time that they used the King of the Ring to build towards a title match like they did for the Royal Rumble to WrestleMania was 2002. The actual
95.
But they built there wasn't built in that I remember that the winner got the title shot. I think Mabel was just kind of, they created that storyline in Your House too, that Mabel then went up against Diesel. They actually advertised the King of the Ring 2002 as the winner will get a title match at SummerSlam, even though Owen Hart and Mabel had done it before, sort of as part of the storyline. All I remember about that one really, because again, I watched it when I was kind of a couple of years past watching it regularly anyway, was the year Brock Lesnar won.
Great Haas match against Test career match, in my opinion.
Yeah. I forgot about this event until probably about 3 or 4 months ago when I had the chance to see it again, and it was a lot better than I remembered. And the RVD match, RVD and Lesnar in the final, was quite credible, really.
Brock was such a breath of fresh air, especially after they bumbled the invasion angle that was, right there on their lap, given to them. And they decided, not for us. We don't want to make all that money. And Brock was the type of unavoidable talent that I was saying that Ludwig Borga wasn't. You can't not push Brock Lesnar because he's so imposing and impressive. And he's the type of guy that Vince always says, he wants that person at the airport that everybody is in awe of and wants to go up and meet. Those are the superstars that he envisions. And that's Brock right there. That's the template.
I think what they did with the King of the Ring there brought some prestige back to it. It had a purpose again. And I think
which is ironic considering it was the last one.
Exactly. I was just about to make that point. It's like, why then did they get to that point of making it mean something again and then decide not to use it?
Because this is a company, it's like what CM Punk said in his infamous pipe bomb. He's a millionaire, could be a billionaire, even though he's a billionaire now. He could have more money, but it's I don't know. There's no accounting for taste.
No. Maybe, I don't know how long it would have survived throughout the 12-match calendar. You've got one match in the Royal Rumble that denotes who gets a title shot at WrestleMania. Do you need one in June to decide who gets it in August? It's
kind of a crutch. It's kind of like, I honestly believe that the Money in the Bank kind of made King of the Ring obsolete.
Yeah, that's true.
And now all attempts at bringing it back, whether it be a Raw or SmackDown only show or a network only show, it just feels completely unnecessary, and
it doesn't fit with anything, And I was looking back this morning at the guys that have won these sort of one night ones, and you're looking at Sheamus, and apparently whoever it was, I think it was Kevin Dunn, made that decision to put it on Sheamus to hurt Sheamus. Because he had no character and he knew he couldn't do anything with it. William Regal, he should have won. He probably should have been someone who won the King of the Ring years ago when it meant something, because he was perfect.
Oh, absolutely. If ever there was a wrestler meant to be a wrestling king, it's a guy whose last name is Regal. I mean, come on.
Yeah. As soon as they got him in there, and I know they missed out with him really when they brought him in 98, they didn't bring him in the best gimmick with this man's man thing. But once they started turning him into his Lord Steven Regal character again, they had the perfect chance to use that. And, you know,
Yeah, and then kind of like the idea of putting the title on Scott Hall instead of Kevin Nash. You can't be trusted with somebody who has those types of demons.
No.
There's a reason why Rob Van Dam getting the title didn't last very long.
No, true. No. But, you know, I'm just trying to think who the other guys are. So Baron Corbin, I think, is the most recent one. Wade Barrett, which, again, as a Brit, it's I didn't really know a lot about him at the time, but it was quite good, I suppose, to see a Brit.
Yeah, but at that point,
with a crown. Exactly. It's just like it's a one-night achievement, and it didn't really lead to anything else.
Without the qualifying matches, without the build, if the company doesn't put any weight and any care into it, how can it expect fans to do so? And
exactly. And I'm not even going to, not that I'm sure any sort of big wigs at WWE are watching this, although they might be.
I'm sure they all are.
I'm not here to implore them to bring this back, because I would much rather conclude this by saying, in my opinion, leave it where it was. To be fair, if you'd have left it at 96, I would still be happy.
Yeah, moment in time. It was. Yeah. It was. There was a time when the company cared about it, and thus the fans cared about it. As soon as they stopped putting the time and effort into it, of course the fans are gonna. I mean, the fact that Sheamus won it, and I guarantee more people are gonna remember Owen Hart was king than Sheamus, and Sheamus happened much more recently.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's going back to when it first started. It's an 80s concept. It is an old school concept. Fair enough. It probably doesn't hold anything these days of any kind of interest. There's other things.
So Survivor Series and Rumble started in '88. So there are things that happened that have the potential of staying if the company stays course and doesn't waver. As soon as they make it seem like a non-entity, like something that doesn't matter, the fans are going to buy into that.
Yeah. I'm surprised.
It's like a jobber entrance of a pay-per-view.
It's like you referred a few times to Survivor Series 92. I mean, I have a soft spot for that event because it was again at that time that I was really getting into it. But I can't look at it as a Survivor Series. No. It doesn't fit. I'm surprised then that was the only time they did it, because if it was these days, they would have run with that concept and still just slapped the name on it. Just because it's a recognizable name, you know, it's a hook. But I'm glad they followed through and it's still happening.
Yeah. You had the odd ones like '98 when it was a tournament.
I forget about that. But even so,
there are some years where there's a lot of non-Survivor Series matches, but it still maintains the integrity of the Survivor Series.
Yeah, I'd much prefer. Maybe this is another show we can do Survivor Series wise. You know, it's I much prefer when it was just those Survivor Series matches. You know, there was nothing else. When they introduced the title match in '91. Fair enough, that was the only other match they had on that card, but it just kind of did open the doors a little bit to.
And they busted them open the next year with the fact there was only the one match that was a match that nobody was looking forward to and nobody cared about. So that's how you make the fans not care about it. You put out a subpar product and with subpar promotion, and you're going to get fans that treat it like an afterthought.
Yeah. So let's close this up. This has been brilliant. I've really enjoyed this because King of the Ring was such a in those early years. This was the event that really did get me excited, get me looking forward to it, because it was a concept. It wasn't just a list of matches. You know, there was something at stake, and it's been great to kind of discuss it with you and share your take on it and everything. If I was to say in closing, if you can put down, when you think of King of the Ring, one moment which is either your favorite or one that always when you hear King of the Ring, what moment does it take you back to?
Honestly, the first one. I think back to when it was first announced and Brett was given the automatic #1 seed, and in the event center, Gene Okerlund was running down some of the qualifying matches. Next week on Superstars will feature Mr. Perfect versus Doink, and on Challenge will feature Reyes Ramon versus El Matador, and that was interesting to me as a fan, because if you're a fan of comic books, what do fans of comic books do? They fantasy book who would win between the Incredible Hulk and the Flash, or who would win between Shazam and Batman. With wrestling, who would win between Bret Hart and Mr. Perfect? Who would win between 1-2-3 Kid and Quang? You know, there's things that in the playground you discuss. You have your favorites who, like, there's no way Bret would beat Taker. There's no way that Shawn would beat Diesel. You know, there'd be things that fans would discuss, and King of the Ring brought that potential out. And so you could get excited, like, oh, here's matches between name superstars as opposed to squash matches or feuds even. These were just people competing for the thrill of competition, and that's what athletes do. And there was a time when professional wrestling was presented in a serious manner where the fans could watch it and not feel like their intelligence was being insulted, would not feel like they had to be in on the joke. We weren't quite yet in the ironic culture, and you could just enjoy it for what it was. I don't know if you can do that anymore because, you know, how can you watch something on the same network that's going to have a kayfabe breaking documentary about the same thing that you watched? You can't separate the two anymore.
No, and that's the thing. That's why it's so different now. You can't put the two products together, you know, 20 years apart, 25 years apart. I'd much rather still be back there in the mid-90s, oblivious, you know, 7-8-year-old, oblivious to the fact that there was workings behind the scenes. I want to believe that what I'm seeing is...
But honestly, Chris, it was the best time. I've introduced non-fans to professional wrestling, and I've never, ever encountered somebody that says, I prefer modern wrestling to the older stuff. They all prefer the older stuff, from the aesthetic, from the promos, from the in-ring action. Everything was better back then, and it used to be better. And it's something about having the memory to remember when it was better, to also exist at the time when it was good. It's good to have that, because thanks to the award-winning WWE Network, we can always go back and watch.
Absolutely.
Wrestling was fun.
And as much as I say against them and how it's changed and that these days, having the network is just I don't have a subscription to it, so I always look every month to see what shows they're giving away free. And it's like this month, I think it's In Your House, you know, so there's a bunch of old In Your Houses that I can go back and watch. It's just it's great because I don't physically have the tapes anymore, you know, so it's good that we've got that opportunity to go back and relive it. But,
well, it was fun talking to you about King of the Ring.
No,
I would love
brilliant.
to chat about any wrestling oriented thing ever.
Hey, we'll do this again. I'll throw out some other ideas, and you know, and we'll just go back down memory lane. So,
all right, well,
that's all good.
Thanks very much for having me.
No problem, mate. No problem. Till next time. You know, thank you everyone for listening and watching in. And this won't be the first, or won't be the last that we meet with Andrew, I'm sure. If you like this one and you've not heard Andrew's first episode, then go back. He's on episode 13, and then I released the entire interview in full, I think, a few shows later. But that's a good one. It's brilliant talking to you, mate. Anytime we get to do this.
And don't forget to smash that subscribe button and hit like and tell all your friends and family.
Absolutely. Thank you. I should have done that myself, but there we go. Thank you very much. Cool. I shall speak to you again, sir.
You done it. Have a good one.
You too, mate. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to like, share, and hit the subscribe button. Also follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Once Upon a Turnbuckle to keep updated about all future shows.